One phone call. That is literally all it took. One single phone call from the very top of Dawg Entertainment, and the most volatile man in West Coast hip-hop went from threatening to expose every clown at the circus to waving the white flag so fast the entire culture got whiplash. The game has officially surrendered to TD. No diss track. No secret studio session. No dramatic last stand for Compton pride. Just a quiet retreat, a brokered peace treaty, and a trail of evaporated tough talk that tells you absolutely everything about who truly runs the West Coast. And the way this whole thing unfolded behind the scenes, the midnight phone calls, the livestream confession that slipped out in front of thousands of unsuspecting viewers, the chain of command that reached all the way to the top of the pyramid, is 10 times crazier than anything the blogs have dared to report. So stay locked in, because we are going through every single layer of this story, and by the end of it, you are going to understand why this might be the most important hip-hop truce of the entire decade. But real quick, before we tear this situation apart piece by piece, do me one solid and hit that like button immediately. Every tap tells the algorithm that real hip-hop storytelling still matters, and it pushes this video in front of the people who actually care about the culture instead of the gossip pages. If you are new around here, subscribe and join the family, because we break these stories down with a level of detail, context, and honesty that you are simply not going to find anywhere else on this platform. Now, let's get into the madness. So here is where everything stands right now. After weeks of rising tension, subliminal shots, comment section warfare, and enough back and forth to fill an entire documentary, the game has decided to stand down. Completely. He is not getting in the booth against Kendrick Lamar. He is not throwing shade at TD. He is not pressing forward with any of the smoke he was promising just days ago. According to everything that has surfaced, there is now a formal peace agreement in place between the game and Dawg Entertainment, and it was not sealed by lawyers or managers. It was sealed by a direct line of communication with the man sitting at the very top of the TD pyramid, Top Dawg himself. And the way the public found out about this truce is absolutely insane. Mac Wap, one of the most fearless voices orbiting the TD camp, was live on stream doing what Mac Wap does best, talking greasy, keeping his boots on the game's neck the exact same way he and Keem had been doing for days, when his phone rang in the middle of the broadcast. And everything changed in an instant. Mac Wap told his audience, right there in real time, that he had just gotten a call from his big dog, who had gotten a call from even higher up, and the message coming down the chain was simple. Stall. Stand down. Chill. Leave it alone. Do not push this any further. Mac Wap repeated the order on stream with a tone that made it crystal clear this was not a suggestion. Even though he openly admitted he did not want to stop, even though clowning the game had practically become a full-time hobby for him, Mac Wap said he had to fall in line, because the higher-ups had spoken and a peace had already been agreed upon behind the scenes. The language floating around that stream was pure movie material. Red alert. Man down. White flag up. The chat was in complete shambles, watching Mac Wap go from attack mode to stand-down mode in a matter of seconds, and he even joked through the frustration of it all, basically admitting that when the call says chill, you chill, because when that level of the hierarchy taps in, you do not negotiate. You comply. And just like that, the loudest weapon TD had aimed at the game was holstered on live stream, in front of thousands of witnesses, before a single diss record ever had the chance to exist. Now, everybody immediately started asking the same question. Who actually made that call? Who are these mysterious higher-ups? And when you line up all the evidence, every sign points directly at Top Dawg. Some people threw Punch's name into the conversation, and we are absolutely going to get to Punch later, because he has his own massive role to play in where this story goes next. But the overwhelming consensus is that Top Dawg is the one moving the chess pieces here, because that is what Top Dawg does. He does not tweet. He does not argue in comment sections. He picks up the phone and things stop. Instantly. You are literally watching the power structure of West Coast rap reveal itself in real time, and it is a masterclass in how the real industry works versus how the internet imagines it works. But to truly understand why this surrender is so shocking, and why so many people are side-eyeing the game right now despite the truce, you have to rewind the tape and examine everything he did to provoke this situation in the first place. Because the game did not stumble into this beef by accident. He practically mailed out invitations. Remember, it was not that long ago that the game was on a press run sounding like a completely changed man. Sitting across from Stat Quo, he was calm. He was measured. He was almost diplomatic. He said he did not want any beef. He said he did not want any problems. The tone was peaceful, the energy was mature, and people walked away from that conversation genuinely believing that the game had turned a corner and chosen wisdom over warfare. And then the internet happened. Days later, he was in the comment sections talking like a completely different human being. Suddenly, he was telling the world he was going to reveal every clown at the circus. Suddenly, he was promising to pull back the curtain and show the public what these people really are. The contrast was jarring. The same man who sat in a chair and preached peace was now online promising exposure, and fans had no idea which version of the game was the real one. That whiplash, that contradiction, is the engine of this entire story, and it is exactly why nobody fully trusts this white flag yet. And let's be clear about something, because context matters here. The game is not some random comment section troll. This is a man with a real legacy. The documentary is a certified classic. He came up under Dr. Dre, ran with Aftermath, survived one of the most bitter fallouts in rap history, and spent 2 decades as one of the most feared battle rappers the West Coast has ever produced. When the game talks, the culture listens, because his resume is bulletproof. And that is precisely why this white flag landed like an earthquake. Legends do not fold. Legends go down swinging. Except this time, the legend looked at the board, counted his pieces, and chose to live. This is a man who went to war with the biggest machine in rap and lived to tell about it. His feud with 50 Cent and G-Unit produced some of the most vicious records of the 2000s, and he did not blink once. He has hundreds of bars of documented fury sitting in the vault. He has battled legends, outlasted eras, and survived being blackballed by the most powerful people in the business. Fear has never been part of his vocabulary, which is exactly why this retreat reads so loudly. When a man with that battle record chooses the white flag, it is not cowardice. It is a calculation. And that calculation says everything about the mountain he was staring up at. The speculation hit a fever pitch when G-Magic, a figure tied to the game's own security circle, started fueling the narrative that the game was actually in the studio cooking up a diss record. Not a subliminal. Not a stray bar on a throwaway verse. A full diss track aimed either directly at Kendrick Lamar or at members of TD. And once that claim started circulating, the entire culture braced for impact, because a diss record from Chuck Taylor aimed at TDE is not just a song. It is a declaration of war that drags decades of history, loyalty, and Compton politics onto the battlefield. And here is the part that made everybody believe it was really about to go down. The game was not denying any of it. He was not shutting down the diss talk. He was feeding the fire with silence and letting the speculation grow legs. In hip-hop, silence at the wrong moment is its own statement, and the silence coming out of his camp while those studio rumors spread had everybody convinced that something nuclear was coming. Now let's really dissect that circus comment, because it deserves a closer look. When the game promised to reveal every clown at the circus, he chose his words like a man who wanted maximum impact with minimum accountability. No names. No targets. Just a vague, cinematic threat designed to let the internet do his dirty work for him. And it worked. For days, hip-hop Twitter turned into a detective agency. Who are the clowns? Who is the ringmaster? Is Kendrick Lamar the main event, or is the whole TD roster under the big top? He watched the chaos he created and let it breathe, because ambiguity is free promotion, and nobody in rap history has understood the value of free promotion better than him. Meanwhile, on the other side of the battlefield, TDE was not letting up for a single second. Keem and Mac Wap had turned the game into their personal mission. Day after day, stream after stream, post after post, they kept the pressure on him relentlessly, and they were not subtle about any of it. They called out what they viewed as strange behavior. They mocked the antics. They poked at every contradiction in his recent run, and they did it with the confidence of people who know the full weight of the machine is standing behind them. And here is what a lot of people missed in the chaos. That pressure worked. The game, a man who has built an entire career on never backing down from a single soul, actually broke character and admitted publicly that he did not like what they were saying about him. Read that again slowly. The game, the same artist who has feuded with half the industry without flinching, was visibly bothered by 2 voices from the TD orbit. That should tell you everything about how heavy that camp's influence really is. When the game is the one asking for the noise to stop, the power dynamic has already been decided. And you have to give Mac Wap and Keem their respect here, because what they did was a masterclass in applied pressure. They did not just attack him. They turned him into a daily program. Every stream had a segment. Every post had a punchline. Mac Wap was on live with Justin Hunt building the case in front of a real audience, and the audience was eating it up. That kind of sustained, organized, entertaining pressure is almost impossible to fight against, because you cannot swing at a moving target that never stops talking. The game was not losing a battle of bars. He was losing a battle of content, and there is no diss record on earth that outraps a daily show, and that is the backdrop against which this peace treaty makes perfect sense. The game was not winning this fight. There was no version of this war where he comes out on top. If he drops a diss at Kendrick Lamar, Kendrick either ignores him and he looks desperate, or Kendrick Lamar responds and turns him into a cautionary tale the same way he did to the biggest pop star on the planet. If the game keeps sparring with Mac Wap and Keem online, he looks like a decorated veteran getting baited by the benchwarmers. Every single road led to embarrassment, and somebody finally made him see the board for what it was. Because you have to understand the terrain Kendrick Lamar is standing on right now. Kendrick Lamar is coming off the single most dominant run modern hip-hop has ever witnessed. Not Like Us did not just win a battle, it became a cultural anthem that the whole world sang in unison. Gen X arrived and swallowed the entire conversation. The Super Bowl stage, the records, the awards, the victory lap that somehow never ended. Kendrick Lamar is not a rapper on a hot streak. He is an institution operating at the absolute peak of his powers, and every metric says his next chapter is only getting bigger. Picking a fight with Kendrick Lamar in this climate is not bold. It is financial and cultural self-destruction. And the machine behind him is just as disciplined as he is. TD is not a label in the traditional sense. It is a family-run fortress built over 2 decades by Top Dawg, steered creatively by Punch's president, and defended publicly by soldiers like Keem and Mac Wap who treat disrespect toward the camp like a personal insult. The reason TD survives every storm is that it moves with one mind. When the family is threatened, everybody speaks. When the family makes peace, everybody falls silent. That kind of unity is almost extinct in this industry, and it is exactly why one phone call from that building can end a war before it starts. But now we have to talk about the shadow hanging over this entire situation, because there is a third party who would have benefited enormously from this war actually happening. And his name is Drake. Think about it honestly. What does Drake want more than anything in the world right now? Drake wants chaos on the West Coast. Drake wants the unity that buried him to fracture into 100 pieces. A full-blown war between the game and Kendrick Lamar, 2 Compton-linked artists, 2 men tied to the legacy of Dr. Dre would have been the single greatest gift the universe could have handed Drake. And fans on that live stream said it out loud in real time. This is exactly what Drake would have wanted. Because Drake has a documented playbook for this exact kind of manipulation. Look at the pattern across his career. Cozy up to the artist holding the grievance. Gas them up. Make them feel like the industry owes them something. Point them at the target. And then, the second the shots start flying, vanish behind the mansion walls and watch the destruction from a safe distance. People on that stream brought up the radio situation. People brought up the way Drake circled lefty gunplay. Drake does not fight his own wars anymore. He funds them, he fuels them, he whispers in the right ears at the right time, and he lets other people bleed for his benefit. And you cannot convince me Drake would not have tried it here. Picture the scenario. The game, feeling disrespected, feeling cut off by Kendrick Lamar, feeling like the forgotten big brother of a coast he helped carry for 20 years, gets a few compliments from the wrong person at the wrong time. Suddenly he thinks he has an ally. Suddenly he believes this war is about respect, never realizing he is being positioned as a human shield in somebody else's grudge match. That is the game within the game, no pun intended, and it is exactly why the adults in the room stepped in before the match got lit. And let's be completely real about where Drake is standing right now, because it explains everything. Ever since the smoke cleared, Drake has been trying to rewrite the ending of a story the whole world already read. Every Drake rollout, every Drake lyric, every carefully planted narrative has been about chipping away at the armor of Kendrick Lamar without ever stepping back into the ring himself. Drake needs a crack in the West Coast wall. Drake needs division, doubt, and distraction. A war between the game and Kendrick Lamar hands Drake all 3 on a silver platter, which is precisely why Drake's silence during this entire saga was so loud. He was not staying out of it. He was waiting for it. And zoom out even further, because the stakes were bigger than 2 artists. Compton is not just a city in this story. It is a symbol. The legacy of Dr. Dre hangs over all of this, the man who connected both of these artists to the world, the common ancestor of 2 different eras of West Coast dominance. A war between the game and Kendrick Lamar would not just embarrass two men. It would crack the foundation of a legacy that took 40 years to build. Every icon who ever wore the crown of that city had a stake in this not happening. And whether it was said out loud or simply understood, that pressure was sitting in the room during every single conversation. Here is the truth the whole industry already knows. A West Coast civil war does not hurt Kendrick Lamar. Kendrick is bulletproof right now. The culture just watched him dismantle the most commercially dominant rapper of a generation and turn that victory into a Super Bowl moment, a chart-topping anthem, and a victory lap unlike anything hip-hop has ever seen. Kendrick Lamar is not losing a single hour of sleep over a diss track from the Doctor's Advocate. The people who actually lose in that war are the West Coast as a whole. The unity takes the hit. The legacy takes the hit. The coast that finally reclaimed the crown starts cannibalizing itself while the man up north laughs all the way to another streaming record. Somebody at TED understood that math perfectly. And that somebody made the call. And one more thing before we close the file on this chapter. Watch how the winners in this story behaved, because the discipline is the real lesson. Kendrick Lamar never typed a word. Top Dawg never posted a thing. The soldiers got loud on command and got quiet on command. Meanwhile, the loudest man in the whole saga ended up being the one waving the flag. That is not a coincidence. That is the entire architecture of power in this industry, laid bare for anybody willing to pay attention. The people with real leverage never have to announce it. They just make calls, and the world rearranges itself around them by sunrise. And while we are being honest about the terrain, look at what the war would have actually been fought over. Not money. Not territory. Not a single measurable thing either man could take home at the end. It would have been a war over feelings, over a phone that stopped ringing, over the ache of watching the little brother become the king while the big brother watched from the driveway. And feelings are the most expensive ammunition in all of hip-hop, because the entire culture can hear them in every bar. The audience always knows when a diss is written from pain instead of from power, and pain records age like milk. Kendrick Lamar writes from power. That has always been the difference, and the game knows the difference better than almost anyone alive, because he spent 2 decades writing from pain and watching the culture process it in real time. And think about what this truce does to the rumor economy that has been feeding on this story for weeks. The channels that were pre-writing their reaction videos to a diss that never existed. The accounts that were already photoshopping the cover art. The fans who had already chosen sides in a war that was never actually declared. All of that content, all of that anticipation, all of that manufactured energy just got deleted by one phone call. And that is the part of this story nobody wants to say out loud. Beef in 2026 is not a battle anymore. It is an economy. It is a content pipeline. And TD just shut down an entire supply chain with a single conversation because they understand something the rest of the industry keeps forgetting. You cannot monetize a war that never happens, and you cannot lose a battle you refuse to attend. There is also a generational reading of this moment that deserves respect. Hip-hop has buried too many chapters of its history and conflict. The genre has watched coasts go to war, watched crews splinter, watched legends spend their final years feuding over things nobody can even remember the origin of. The West Coast of this era made a different choice. The older general picked up the phone. The younger soldiers stood down on command. The king stayed silent and kept building. Whatever you think about the white flag, recognize what you actually witnessed this week. You watched a culture that used to resolve these situations with violence resolve one with a phone call. That is not weakness. That is evolution, and it is the reason the West is standing taller than it has stood in 30 years. And do not sleep on what this means for the music itself, because that is the quiet headline hiding underneath all of this drama. A peaceful West Coast is a productive West Coast. Kendrick Lamar does not have to spend a single bar on cleanup duty, which means whatever he is building right now stays pure, stays focused, stays aimed at the art instead of the argument. The game gets to channel 2 decades of scars into records instead of comment sections. And the next generation of Compton kids watching this saga just received the most valuable lesson the culture can teach. The strongest move in the room is not always the loudest one. Sometimes the most gangster thing a man can do is wave the white flag, keep his legacy intact, and live to make another classic. And here is what makes the game's aggression so baffling in the first place. This is the same man who spent years telling anybody who would listen not to test Kendrick Lamar. There are multiple clips, multiple interviews, multiple moments where he is on camera warning the entire industry to leave Kendrick alone. He was practically the president of the Do Not Mess with Kendrick Club. He watched other rappers get humbled and nodded along like a man who had already seen the future. So for him to be the one flirting with provocation now is not just surprising. It is completely out of character with everything he has preached for years. But the hurt is real, and it deserves to be acknowledged honestly. Reports from this past week made it clear that the game found out Kendrick Lamar had cut him off, and by all accounts that stung him deeply. You have to understand the psychology at play. He sees himself as a guardian of Compton, a soldier who held the city down before Kendrick ever touched a major stage. In his mind, he earned a permanent seat at the table. So when the king of the coast stops answering, when the phone goes quiet, when the artist he championed ascends to a level where the old relationships no longer seem to matter, that rejection festers. And festering rejection, mixed with his legendary impulsiveness, is exactly how you get clown comments and circus threats at 2 in the morning. Still, there is a canyon-sized difference between being hurt and being willing to go to war. And every piece of evidence says the game never actually wanted that war. He wanted acknowledgement. He wanted his respect. He wanted the new regime to remember who kicked the door open for the city. The circus comments were not a battle cry. They were a cry for attention from a man watching the culture celebrate everybody except him. And unfortunately for him, when you cry for attention in the direction of TD, the response is not a hug. It is Keem and Mac Wap turning your name into daily content. Which brings us to the credibility problem, and it is a massive one. The game has a flip-flop issue that even his most loyal fans cannot defend. The stat quo conversation is the perfect case study. In the chair, face to face, he is Mr. Peace. No beef. No problems. Nothing but love. Then he logs on and transforms into a man promising to expose the entire circus. Two completely different human beings inside of 1 week. So forgive the entire culture for asking the obvious question right now. Is this white flag real? Or is this just the latest mood swing in a pattern we have all watched 100 times before? Because if he wakes up next Thursday feeling disrespected again, this entire peace treaty could be ash by the weekend. And the internet's reaction to the white flag has been exactly as ruthless as you would expect. The memes started within minutes. The jokes wrote themselves. Half the timeline is calling it the fastest surrender in rap history, and the other half is calling it the smartest decision the game has made in a decade. Both things can be true at once. That is the strange territory he lives in now. He is simultaneously the butt of the joke and the beneficiary of the mercy. Hip-hop has never quite known how to process a fighter choosing peace, and this situation is no exception. And we have literally seen this movie before, which is why the skepticism cuts both ways. Remember when J. Cole stepped into the ring, fired his shot, and then stood on a stage days later and apologized to Kendrick Lamar in front of the entire world? The culture dragged J. Cole for months. They called it the softest move in rap history. But time has been kind to that decision, because J. Cole read the same board the game just read. J. Cole understood that there is no trophy waiting on the other side of a war with Kendrick Lamar, only a funeral. Say what you want about the white flag, but the game is now the second major artist to look at the Kendrick Lamar gauntlet and choose life. History may remember that as the smartest move he ever made. And mark this down, because almost nobody is saying it plainly. Even if he had released the hardest diss record of his entire career, Kendrick Lamar was never going to respond. Not a verse. Not a bar. Not a subliminal. Not a single syllable. Kendrick Lamar responds to threats to the throne, and like it or not, the Compton veteran is not a threat to the throne. He is a legend from a previous era throwing pebbles at a fortress. He would have been screaming into a void, burning his own legacy for a fight that only existed on his side of the battlefield. Deep down, he knows that. Deep down, he has always known that. That is why he spent years warning everybody else to never try it. Notice something else, too. Through this entire saga, Kendrick Lamar never said a word. Not one. No posts, no comments, no subliminals, nothing. That is not an accident. That is doctrine. Kendrick Lamar does not do comment sections. Kendrick Lamar lets the machine handle the noise while he stays in the lab, and when he finally does speak, it is on wax and it is devastating. The game knows this better than anyone because he watched the entire world learn it in real time. Silence from Kendrick Lamar is not weakness. It is the sound of a man who has already won the argument and sees no reason to repeat himself. And hip-hop's relationship with the white flag has always been complicated, which is what makes this moment so fascinating to watch unfold. This is a genre built on never folding, on standing 10 toes down no matter the cost, on treating retreat as a fate worse than defeat. But look at the scoreboard of history. The artists who chose peace at the right moment almost always outlasted the ones who chose pride at the wrong one. Beef sells for a quarter. Legacy sells for a lifetime. The game has spent 20 years building a name that matters, and one disciplined phone call just protected all of it. Now, let's go back to the man at the center of the ceasefire, because Top Dawg deserves his own chapter in this story. Think about what it actually means that one phone call ended a potential war. In an era where rap beef is farmed for content, where every disagreement gets stretched into a 6-week monetization cycle, the head of TD picked up the phone and shut the entire machine down. Not with a statement. Not with a post. With a conversation. That is a level of authority that cannot be bought, streamed, or faked. That is generational power. And notice the chain of command and how the order reached the public. Top Dawg did not call a press conference. Word came down through Mac Wap's big dog that the higher-ups wanted a stall. And Mac Wap, a man who would happily spend an entire month roasting the game for sport, a man who was clearly enjoying every second of the smoke, immediately fell in line. That tells you everything about the discipline inside that camp. Even the attack dog's answer to the kennel master. When Top Dawg says the war is over, and the soldiers can grumble about it on live stream all they want, but they comply every single time. There is also a strategic genius to the timing that should not be ignored. TD applied maximum public pressure first. Keem and Mac Wap softened the target for days, made the game feel the heat, made him publicly uncomfortable, made him admit on record that the talk bothered him. And only then, once he was softened up and searching for an exit, did the phone call come. That is not luck. That is siege warfare. You do not offer the peace treaty while your opponent still feels bold. You offer at the exact moment he realizes he is surrounded. He did not surrender because he suddenly discovered inner peace. He surrendered because TD built a situation where surrender was the only door left open. Now, does this cost the game something? Of course it does. There is a segment of the culture that will never let him live this down. Every future tough-talking interview will be met with clown emojis and circus jokes. Every future claim of fearlessness will be answered with a screenshot of the white flag. That is the tax he pays for talking first and thinking later. But compare that tax to the alternative. A public dismantling at the hands of Kendrick Lamar would not have been a tax. It would have been a foreclosure. The game lost a little pride this week. He kept everything else. And honestly, credit where credit is due, this is the best possible outcome for everybody involved. The game avoids the most one-sided beating of his career. Kendrick Lamar stays above the fray, exactly where he belongs, untouched and unbothered. The West Coast keeps its unity at the precise moment that unity is the most valuable currency in all of hip-hop. And Drake, sitting somewhere refreshing his mentions and hoping for Compton chaos, gets absolutely nothing. No civil war. No distraction. No opening. Just a coast that handled its business internally like adults and left Drake standing on the outside looking in. That is what leadership looks like. And let's not ignore how the story even reached us, because it says everything about the modern era of rap news. There was no press release. No official statement. No carefully worded note app screenshot. The biggest development in West Coast hip-hop this month broke on a live stream, in real time, with the chat watching a man get ordered to stand down in the middle of his own broadcast. The old gatekeepers are gone. The new gatekeepers are phone calls and live streams, and the culture now watches power move in real time instead of reading about it 3 weeks later. So, what does the game do from here? The smart play is obvious. Get back to the music. Get back to what built the name in the first place. The pen is still there. The voice is still there. The catalog still gets respect in every room it enters. There is a version of the next 12 months where he drops a focused, hungry project and lets the work remind everybody why the name rang bells for 2 decades. The white flag only becomes a permanent stain if he lets it be the story. If he buries it under great music, this whole saga becomes a footnote. That choice is entirely his. But, and this is the part that should keep everybody watching, this story is not finished. Not even close. Because there is one more domino that has not fallen yet, and its name is Punch. Word is that Punch is set to make a guest appearance on the Third Verse podcast alongside Stat Quo and Justin Hunt. Yes, that's Stat Quo. The same man who sat across from the game and received the peaceful version of events that collapsed within days. And now Punch, the president of TD, one of the most respected strategic minds in the entire music industry, is walking directly into that room. The questions write themselves. Is Punch going to address the game situation directly? Is he going to frame this whole saga as a misunderstanding, a miscommunication, the way so many people close to the situation have been whispering? Is he going to confirm the peace treaty, deny it, or say absolutely nothing and let the silence do the talking? And here is the wildest possibility of all. What if Punch reveals there was a stipulation attached to this truce? Because peace treaties in this business are never free. Somebody always gives something up. And right now, nobody outside that phone call has any idea what was promised in exchange for TD holstering its weapons. And let's play with that stipulation theory for a second, because it is more realistic than people think. What does TD actually want from the game? Silence. No more circus comments. No more studio rumors coming from the security team. No more flip-flopping between peace talks and internet threats. And what does the game want from TD? For Keem and Mac Wap to stop making his name a daily segment. Both sides had something the other side desperately needed, and that is the anatomy of every real peace deal ever brokered. That phone call was not a favor. It was a transaction, and both sides walked away richer. That is the thread I am pulling on next, and trust me, the second that third verse episode drops, we are breaking down every single syllable of it right here on this channel. Because if Punch says the wrong name, if he confirms the wrong detail, this entire story explodes into its second chapter, and you are going to want to already be locked in when it does. So now I need to hear from you, because the comment section is about to become a war zone of its own. First question. Is this white flag permanent, or is the game going to flip-flop again the moment he feels disrespected? Second question, and be honest with yourself. Did TD just save him from himself, or did they strong-arm a West Coast legend into silence? And third, the big one. If this war had actually happened, if he had really stepped into the booth against Kendrick Lamar, what does the scoreboard look like when the smoke clears? Some of you are about to say some truly wild things down there, and I am going to be reading every single one of them. Sound off. If you made it all the way to the end of this one, you are built different, and I genuinely appreciate you riding with the channel. Hit that like button if you have not already, subscribe if you are new, and share this with that one friend who still swears the game was about to pull off the upset of the century. Your support keeps this machine running, and it means more than you know. And if you missed the last live session, the full replay is waiting for you, linked down below and pinned on the channel page. It is free to check out over on Patreon, and the conversations in there go even deeper than anything we can say out here. And listen, before you go anywhere. While the West Coast was busy signing peace treaties, a completely different storm has been brewing on the other side of the map, and it involves a certain champagne-loving superstar who is about to learn that karma has an extremely long memory. That video is sitting on your screen right now. Click it. Because what Drake does next might accidentally start the very war he could not buy. I will see you over there. Peace, and keep it alleged.